Well, it was a busy weekend, and I suspect that means we're going to have a lot to talk about as we get through the first couple of days of the program. We'll have an opportunity in the next half hour to speak with Randy Staples from Idaho Weekly Briefing. Randy is going to be chatting with us a bit this morning about the governor's address last week and the money being devoted to education spending. Now, keep in mind, Randy comes from a very traditional newspaper perspective. Before he left for publishing Idaho Weekly Briefing, he worked at newspapers across the Northwest. That does not necessarily mean that he's got an axe to grind. He is a bit older than a lot of your perhaps younger media folks who think that they're out to save the world and have a particular philosophical viewpoint that they don't want to deviate from. He actually says the governor's proposal is impressive, yet Democrats certainly would like more. We'll talk a little bit about that. Also, gasoline prices. Randy has a ticker that he keeps every week on the highest and lowest prices across the state of Idaho. And as we talked about last week, we're in a situation right now where we've got gasoline prices that, well, will be dropping, we would expect soon, but they're still running about 30 to 35 cents higher, it seems on average, than they were a year ago at this time, even though the price per barrel is considerably lower. There's some, I'll put it this way, some discussion about that too at Wall Street Journal today and why that is. And it makes perfectly good sense once you give it some thought. We hope to get to that a little bit later in the program as well. And Randy's also going to talk with us about the miscommunication that apparently resulted during the elk collaring of some wolves being collared as well in the backwoods. And that has the liberals and the environmentalists all upset because, well, by gosh, we need more wolf attacks on your cattle. So by actually having a few of them collared, the liberals believe that this is a backdoor attempt to kill them, which many of you would think, what's wrong with that? I mean, it's a pest, for crying out loud. A very large pest with 4 legs and big teeth. So all of those things coming up a little later in our program. Bill Colley with you today, this Monday morning, the 18th of January. I thank you for taking some time out for us on Top Story. It's 36, coming up on 9 minutes after 8 o'clock. So a lot to talk about today. The big story over the weekend was the release of Pastor Saeed Abidini. At least on the regional level, that took a lot of what you might call ink in the old parlance of media. A lot of that was spilled over that story over the weekend. I was reading something last night online, and his wife was in November. She had come forward and she had said in an interview with a large Christian publication that she wasn't so sure that she was going to be taking him back because she said that during the course of their marriage, there were some abusive moments. It got reported widely all over the world. And people said, well, maybe Pastor Abidini isn't really a very nice guy. Here's the thing. With his release, I almost think that was something she was instructed to do because then it sounded as if there was no one waiting for him at home, and it may have taken some of the heat off the man while he was sitting in an Iranian dungeon. And in fact, it may have made his life a little bit better the last 3 months up until his release, because her reaction after his release was anything, it was just complete joy. And that leads me to believe that was all just a ruse to try to get a little bit better treatment for him from his Iranian captors. Now, Lieutenant Colonel Alan West has a piece. I saw this last night before I went to bed. Apparently, after these 3 people were released, and they're in Germany now at an air base, and they'll be coming home after they get checked out by the doctors and the like. We still have people who are there, who are being held captive. In fact, the former FBI agent who was also doing some intelligence work was not among the released. And according to Colonel West, there are some additional Americans who have been since picked up by the Iranian government. And in other words, the Iranian government said, here, you can have these 3 back. Thank you very much for the $1.7 billion, whatever the total happened to be. Was it $1.7 billion? Or it might be more than that, right? I think we were talking in the tens of billions of dollars. It's a huge amount of money the Iranians are getting, and the United States will pay them interest. This was money that was seized in the early days after the Iranian mullahs had their revolution and the Shah was overthrown. We're going to be paying them interest on all of this as well. Thank you very much for taking our diplomats hostage for 444 days back in the beginning of your revolution. Here's your interest payment. We also know that late last week, apparently, John Kerry was told, If you don't lift those sanctions on us, these people aren't coming home. So in other words, it was ransom. It was a ransom to release these people. It has often been said you do not pay ransom to terrorists, but apparently in this particular situation, when you're trying to make that nuclear agreement look good, you go ahead and you do it. Can we also throw in the seizure of the 2 U.S. Navy ships? And you may remember the original story was, well, one of them had engine trouble and drifted into Iranian territorial waters. So it was our fault, but the Iranians were very nice. They allowed us to say that we were sorry, and they released these fellows. One of them happened to be a woman, we should point out. Then I read this over the weekend. Those boats come equipped with 2 engines. This is a fail-safe, good engineering, that when the Navy builds these boats, they get 2 engines. In case one goes down, there's a second engine they fire up. So you got 2 boats with 4 engines total. One drifts into Iranian waters, and apparently the other one went to tow it away? Or did they both drift into Iranian waters when one engine on the 2 boats, which both come equipped with 2 engines, when one of those engines failed? So what's the explanation here? What was going on? And the Iranians managed to pick clean all of our high-tech gadgets that happen to be on these boats. Also, by taking the GPS and the cell phones and everything else that happened to be on board, then there's no way that our sailors can point to these GPS units and say, actually, we were not in Iranian waters. So it looks as if we got bullied on that one, and that it may well have been that these people were not in Iranian waters. In fact, one former Navy SEAL says, as soon as these boats left port, the Iranians knew that they were going to track them and seize them. And again, we allowed that to happen. Alan West says 4 more Americans have been picked up off the streets in Iran and are now being held captive. So in other words, they grabbed our boats, humiliated our sailors, humiliated our military, humiliated our country. Then they turned around and with a king's ransom, they let 3 people go, one of them coming home to Idaho. Well, we're happy about that, but it's a bittersweet type of happiness. And after letting the 3 go, they grabbed 4 more. Now, what kind of government? We've got the most powerful military in the world. We would have the ability to squash these people like a group of ants crawling around on your sidewalk. We've had the opportunity to do it now for 37 years, and yet we allow it to continue. Ronald Reagan had a completely different approach. After they messed with a couple of our boats on the seas way back in the late 1980s, he splashed several of theirs. Not directly, but he gave the orders, and we took out a good chunk of their Navy in that area. Problem solved for a long, long time. They understand that type of talk. That's the part of the world they're in. They're not weak-kneed, panty-waist liberals. These are the type of people who understand a good slap across the face. That gets their attention. That's why when Reagan got inaugurated as president, that initial group of hostages were suddenly set free, because they knew he was going to come in there and clean their clocks otherwise. And then later, before he left the White House, he did clean their clocks. But they know what they're dealing with now. They know they're dealing with the effete people like John Kerry and Barack Obama, and that they can get away with all of this. And it's going to continue at least until January of this time next year, when we finally have someone in the White House who's got a set of stones. Bill Colley with you this morning on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. You can reach our program by giving us a shout at 736-0300. That's 736-0300. Also, my email address is bill.colley@townsquaremedia.com. bill.colley@townsquaremedia.com. And I try to check the email frequently during the course of the program. I do, however, give more consideration, obviously, to the telephone calls. After all, it is a sound medium. 816, it's 37, and you're up next. You're on Top Story.
Man, I hope we don't have somebody with a set of ovaries.
Well put. Last night, we'll talk about this a little later in the show. You want to talk about someone who's an absolute incompetent as a politician. She was speaking during the liberal debate, and she was questioned about Wall Street and its big money and how sometimes people on Wall Street get away with things the average person wouldn't get away with. And when all of that came up, her campaign actually tweeted one of her lines She said, nobody is too big for jail. Well, talk about foot and mouth. You, there is a competence level that you look for in someone running for high office. And no matter what they try to tell you over on the left that she is competent. I read a great many reviews over the weekend of friends who went to see the movie 13 Hours. And their comments are, how will we put this? Quite unflattering about Mrs. Clinton, because even though she's never mentioned during the course of the movie, there are some moments in this in the course of this picture show where you know who they're talking about and you know who is stonewalling the effort to send a rescue mission into Libya. This is Mrs. Clinton responding to a question from NBC about the movie and the accusations, and you can just tell that there's a big word. It's called prevaricator. It matches her well.
Very quickly, the movie 13 Hours, about the incident in Benghazi. I know there's a lot of chatter about the movie itself, but let me ask you, the controversy involves whether or not everything was done that night to rescue Ambassador Stevens. Looking back, do you believe everything was done that night that could have been done to save his life?
Based on everything I know and based on a Republican-led Intelligence Committee investigation, a Republican-led Armed Services Committee investigation, the answer to that is yes, that people were scrambling, trying to figure out what could be done, if anything. And I can't speak to a movie, but I know people have raised questions about, some of the dramatization. I testified for more than 11 hours, as you know. I answered every question that I was asked. And my real focus, Chuck, is what do we do to make sure that when we send Americans into harm's way, military or civilian, our diplomats or our soldiers, we take every precaution to the best of our ability in what is a unpredictable and dangerous world to make sure that they can discharge their duties and be safe while doing it.
Yeah, but did you abandon these guys? Did you just leave them hanging out there? Did you abandon them? And why did you do it if you did? Why can't we get someone asking her a question like that? 819, Bill Colley with you on Top Story. Her response so far has been about the movie, it's a lie. Her response is that the families of all of the heroes who were killed over there are liars. Unlike, of course, she and her husband, who always tell the truth and would like you to trust them for at least another 8 years. Coming up on a short break, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. And as a sop to all of you liberals today, I'll mention it. It's Martin Luther King Jr. Day. There, we got that one out of the way, and now you can say that I mentioned it and that I at least acknowledge that we have a day off. Or some of you do. Isn't that the point of a holiday, right? A friend of mine just sent me his thoughts on Hillary Clinton. None of which I can repeat on the radio. He's not alone, though. I'll tell you what, there are tens of millions of people around the country who feel exactly the same way about that woman. Who really watched this debate last night? We had two of the more exciting football games of the postseason on yesterday. Who in their right mind was watching the Democrats debate? Come on. Someone will say, well, it was after the ball game. Yeah, you watched football for 6-7 hours. Watching a bunch of Democrats preen around on stage and try to kiss up to each other. But they don't have the same intramural, battles going on that the Republicans have. 824, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. When was the last time you asked a friend for medical advice? I bring that up because this Wednesday morning between 8:30 and 9 o'clock, we'll be joined by a physician assistant, Russell Singleton, from Tripp Family Medicine right here in Twin Falls, located on Fillmore Street directly across from the main post office. Russell's going to be chatting about some health issues with us, and you have an opportunity. You've got a comment or question for that medical professional in studio to give us a call during that half hour, and you don't have to pay anything for getting your question answered. I want to bring that up. Should point out, too, as well, that Tripp Family Medicine served ice cream sundaes to the staff here at the radio station last week. They have become the favorite doctor office in all of Twin Falls County. At least in this building, there's quite a lot of respect for them now, and lots of people, I think, are thinking they're going to be finding a new office to go to for their doctoring. We recommend you tune in each Wednesday between 8:30 and 9 o'clock, right here on Top Story for that segment of the program. That is Better Health with Tripp Family Medicine. And remember, Life's too short not to feel good. 8:25 now, 37. Bill Maher, who is known as a flaming liberal, he hosts a program over at HBO, had some comments over the course of the weekend about Islamic resettlement, that is, Syrian refugees and the like, coming to the Western world. Is that coming to a neighborhood near you? I saw the first of these people over the weekend while I was doing some shopping. I could tell the woman was wearing a tent and the husband was yelling at her in the aisles at Walmart. He's on HBO reflecting that Ambassador Chris Stevens didn't look after his own safety, but that there may have been some other problems involved as well, and that is political correctness.
He didn't want a lot of security.
No, and purposefully. He wanted to stay at the consulate, and he was offered to stay at the annex where he'd be fully protected.
And I have to say, I mean, this to me is a problem, I think, with American thinking on both sides, is that it's noble that he did not want a lot of security there, because hi, I'm an American, I'm your friend. But insisting that people around the world who are not like us are going to be like us. This was Bush's mistake in Iraq, was it not? They want freedom. Well, freedom might not be on their top of their list of what they really want.
This was quite an incredible show. He had also Dr. Cornel West, who was on the program with him. You may remember Dr. West. He was in a very popular children's series long ago called Our Gang. He was on the program as well, and he tried to tell Bill Maher, we're only arguing about a slice of Islam here. Yes, a slice of Islam. They have no conception that what we're dealing with is very dangerous and could end up destroying us, or at least they don't want to acknowledge it. People are awakening to a threat, according to Bill Maher, from Syrian refugees.
And I think we saw this just recently in Cologne, Germany. You know, when all the Syrian refugees were going to Europe, I wasn't for it. And I think a lot of people are coming around to that position.
Unless, of course, you're part of the elite here in Twin Falls, and then anyone who's opposed is still a racist bigot, and we just don't understand, and you're smarter than the rest of us, and we couldn't possibly lead our own lives, so we've got to follow your lead and your example, and you'll show us how we best can live. Meanwhile, Maher went on to start arguing with Ralph Reed. You remember Ralph Reed? He used to portray a Christian on TV, and then after he lined his pockets, I think that charade came to an end. Maher's trying to make a point about Islam, and I think he pretty much shoots Reed down at this point.
There's no evidence at all that the thugs and the hooligans that were committing these kinds of crimes on New Year's Eve in Cologne, Germany, were devout Muslims. There's no evidence of that.
That is...
You really cannot indict all peace-loving Muslims who subscribe to that religion because of the bad actions.
I'm not indicting all of them. Absolutely not.
Well, you're
the
saying
problem is that you're indicting none of them.
Whoa, thank you. might hurt their feelings, and we couldn't do that, and they really should come here and take our jobs, and then take our children, and then when there's enough of them, they can get rid of us, and then we can atone for our colonial past. Bill Colley with you this morning. Randy Staples from Idaho Weekly Briefing is going to join us in about 10 minutes. I do want to remind you about our friends at Tint Lady. You may have some issues with some chipping of paint. You may also have some issues with a lot of bleaching going on in your home or your business or even your automobile from the effects of the sun, the ultraviolet light that comes streaming through. You can get a free estimate on tinting your windows in any of those locations by giving a telephone call to Tint Lady at 736-8469 or go online at tintladyidaho.com. Locally owned and operated, they've got more than 20 years' experience in the business. 1887 Highland Avenue East in Twin Falls, open Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., Saturday by appointment only. And remember, don't squint, get tint.